I'm Gary Yantin, Director of Best Practice here at VinciWorks, and I'm joined today by Nick Henderson, our Director of Learning and Content. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Gary. Yeah.
So not that we need any more initials or any more acronyms, but other businesses are also talking about B Corp, and they're using B Corp to demonstrate their credentials and commitments. What actually is B Corp, and what are they actually doing there, Nick?
So if you haven't heard of it, B Corp stands for Benefit Corporations, and this is a certification process that can actually be quite a good way to demonstrate overall ESG commitments. Now, B Corp is a regular, for-profit business, but one that's committed themselves to considering the impact of their decisions on their people, on their customers, suppliers, and the environment. And a B Corp tries to ensure a balance between purpose, people, and profit. And it actually began in the US, but today there's over 4,000 B Corps in 77 different countries, with over 500 in the UK, including some leading law firms as well have become B Corps.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. I think putting the purpose before the profit, but not ditching the profit, being reasonable, being realistic, and saying, well, that's why we exist. But putting the purpose in there as well. So what does that actually look like in practice? So what commitments, for example, would a B Corp need to make? What would a company or a firm need to do to transition over to B Corp status?
It's usually quite practical things that a company commits to doing. For instance, there was a business going through a B Corp process recently, and they committed to increasing the female representation within their business by 5 percentage points. So they wanted to have 38% women inside their workforce as opposed to what they were before. And they also wanted to improve racial diversity to 10% of their workforce. On the environment side, they committed to net zero by 2025, and then to actually becoming carbon negative by 2030. And they underpinned that with making sure that their offices were going to be using 100% renewable energy. They wanted to increase the use of sustainably sourced or recycled office supplies and office furniture. And there were a law firm, so they actually established or they enhanced their pro bono program, and they committed to doing 10,000 hours of volunteering and also to support around 350 young people to do employability and mentoring within their business.
So that sounds really interesting, and it sounds like some of those initiatives were things that they came up with themselves to suit their business, the type of business they are, the type of people they are. How do they, though, get certified and recognized by, whoever they're meant to be recognized by as a B Corp? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's an organization that does that certification process. You need to undertake an audit, which is published. They have a kind of 200-point scale where your company is judged against, and I think you need around 80 points to secure the B Corp status. You need to be reaccredited every 2 years. You have to do interviews. You have to provide, I think it's around 10 pieces of written evidence, and undertake also a KPMG audit. And before starting the process, you would need to have quite a good charity and social enterprise program. If you're a law firm, you'd want to have some strong public interest clients, substantial pro bono work. And for everyone, going through that process, having good employment practices, paying a living wage, a strong environmental management system, those are all kind of givens before you start the process. It might not be for everyone, but it can be an interesting way of demonstrating your commitment to ESG. So it is certainly something that you might want to have a look at if you're interested in doing a bit more.
But it sounds like you don't just decide we're going to be a B Corp and what do we need to change. It sounds like you need to be doing those things already, and that it comes naturally to you as a business, and then having the B Corp status is sort of a natural follow-on. Maybe you have to change one or two things, or
no, I think you'd want to be doing a lot, like you said, doing a lot of that stuff anyway, and you want to kind of maybe formalize it a bit more. I think particularly for professional services firm, which doing one of those very large, complex ESG frameworks might not be right for them.
Yeah.
So this is something that, you know, is more scalable. So if you're a smaller organization, you know, if you're, you know, office based, if you know, law firms, I think in particular, it's quite popular with, it's a good place to look at, to do something ESG related. Actually, you know, you come out at the end with a certification. You're actually coming out with something that, you know, again, it's a not standardized arena ESG, but you're coming out with something that's certified.
Yeah. And what if you're not at that level? Let's be realistic. Not everybody's doing thousands of hours of pro bono and thousands of hours of volunteering and having carbon targets. What if you're at the other end of the scale? You know you've got to do something. You haven't done anything yet. You're just starting out on ESG. What would you say are the most important steps to get started with? What should people do to get on the ESG trail?
So I think setting up an ESG committee is the best place to start, really. Bring in, you know, the people who are going to be able to make decisions, who are going to be able to get a hold of the data they need to look at, and then start to figure out the different parts of the business that you want to look at. So, and take it methodically. Start with, you know, do you know how much electricity all your different sites use? Do you have a policy to deal with waste? Are you, you know, reviewing recycling? Are you sourcing your furniture from sustainable places? Are you buying electricity from renewable sources? And actually, you're probably, as we mentioned before, more compliant than you think you are. So if you're already doing training on bribery, tax evasion, if you already have incident registers to prevent accidents, if you already, you know, are monitoring diversity and encouraging a more diverse workforce, then you're already probably doing quite a lot around ESG. And that committee can then help to bring those different streams of information together and look at it within a kind of existing risk and compliance framework. Then on the environmental side, you can look at things to, you know, switching to a fully renewable electricity provider, installing, you know, sensor lighting so electricity doesn't get wasted, or even setting yourself up with a framework like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which can be a good measure of overall ESG compliance. So I think really just starting with getting the interested and relevant people around into one place and start to figure out what are we able to do and what we're already doing at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a wide enough topic that it's not too scary to get started on some aspects of it. If you feel like you're not doing any of it, it's really, you know, there's a lot to be focusing on across any business and the whole of any business. Nick, we had lots of questions that people sent in, and thank you very much to everyone who did send in questions to us. We have got some time to go through a few of those questions. If we don't get to yours, as we always say, please just do send it to us at VinciWorks. You can tweet us or you can email us your question and we will get back to you. And again, I would suggest having a look at our guide that we produced recently on ESG and some of our previous webinars, which are all available on our website. If any of this has led you to think, well, maybe I need some background reading on the topic, those guides are available for you to download. So the first question we had in was about mining. Is mining truly attempting to decarbonize and reduce emissions? Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, about mining specifically, I'm not sure if I could kind of talk about the veracity of what the industry is doing, but I think in general, there's certainly a significant push for carbon-heavy industries to, you know, become net zero, and I think that's what we saw in Glasgow with commitments to move finance and investment into low-carbon alternatives. So that's not necessarily that a bank is not going to invest in a mine, but if they've got two options, then they'll look at investing in a mine that's got a sustainability plan that commits to a living wage for its workers, that doesn't have modern slavery in the supply chain, that offsets even the environmental impact of the mining itself. That's really what ESG investments is looking at, is taking money from non-ESG places into ones that are actually making more of a net good. Yeah,
that's really interesting, actually. Another question that we've had in is, what metrics can professional service firms use to meaningfully report on environmental impact?
So like James Alexander from UK SIF was saying earlier, there's plenty within just how the business operates to consider. Lighting, waste, recycling, cycle to work schemes, renewable energy, carbon offsetting travel. There's plenty of initiatives that even an office-based firm can start to do to reduce the environmental impact. So like we mentioned a bit before, having a committee to look at these things can then bring everything together, what you're doing currently, and then think about some new initiatives that will help.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact phrase that James used, but something like, you have to be able to measure it to be able to know what impact it's having, which is a really important point. So if you don't know what you're doing in the first place, you can't know how you're going to reduce it. So
exactly,
that's a good starting point. Another question that we had, and I think again Oscar mentioned this in your interview with him, we all seem to have heard now of TCFD. You mentioned it in your introduction a lot, but what is TNFD?
So TNFD, that's the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. So it is related to TCFD, but more about the natural environment as opposed to climate change specifically. And this was set up in 2020 and has been endorsed by the G7 finance ministers and also elements of the G20. And this is an initiative that aims to secure and protect the natural environment, given that more than half the world's economic output is dependent on nature. And the problem that the TNFD organization has kind of identified is that financial institutions and corporations don't have access to good data to understand how nature impacts on their immediate financial performance or longer term financial risk. So what would happen if, all of the kind of arable land in a certain country became, unusable? What happens if the rainforest is cut down? How does that impact on the economy? How does that impact on individual companies? And so TNFD seeks to improve that understanding with disclosures, a disclosure framework. And given that the UK is pushing ahead with TCFD, I think it seems likely that TNFD is going to be something that's going to follow and become more of a bigger framework for businesses to think about in the near future.
Now, our last question for today, anyway, is where can we have our company rated for ESG by an external provider?
So as we touched on earlier, ESG ratings are what our companies or ratings companies say about a different business. So as we said, there isn't one international standard for ESG ratings. There's actually a few quite well-respected organizations which do conduct ESG audits and ratings. Those are companies that include Bloomberg, S&P, and Dow Jones indices, Just Capital, MSCI, and Refinitiv are a few of the most well-regarded ESG ratings companies. So if that is something you're interested in, those are some places you can go and look at.
Nick, thank you very much for that. That was a lot of information. I think we're not even scratching the surface yet, are we, of ESG and what it can do and what people need to do. If you're just starting out to understand that yourselves, we have got a lot of information available. As we said, our guide to ESG is available to download. If you're more advanced, though, in ESG at the moment and you think you do have an awareness of it, but are interested in what you do now to assess it and monitor it, OmniTrack would be a good place to look to find out how that can be used to monitor ESG within your organization. Things like tracking systems, forms, all of those things will help you actually assess your existing ESG efforts. And OmniTrack can actually customize the forms to help you report on the outcomes of the ESG efforts that you're putting in. We already have a lot of that information available in OmniTrack, but we're working on a lot more to create a bigger framework and a bigger dashboard of ESG issues. So please do contact us if you want more information either on the course or on OmniTrack or any other aspect of managing your ESG work within your organization. Thanks again, finally, to Nick. It was a really interesting topic. Thanks for all of your background work on it and for following what's been going on in Glasgow.
No problem, Gary.